Hey, Brandon. All right. You know what? Let me see where I'm at here. So, got you posted, and I've got. Okay, yeah. I just had to get a little organized there for a second. I lost track for 1 second, but I'm back on track now. So here's um, your sketches in the window, and I think it's a really interesting approach so far. I've got a few recommendations I think are going to make a lot of sense to you. Um, so the first thing, well, let's go through the scenario. Let's go through the narrative and let me describe what I'm seeing. Okay. So we've got the first frame where you're introducing, it's a setting. You're introducing the setting and the main player. That's great. All right. So at this point, we have the subject has the sword and the sword breaks as he's practicing. Looks like he's practicing on like a dummy here. So that's pretty cool. Sword breaks, right? And then now we have him looking at the sword in his hands from his perspective. That's a really, really interesting transition right there because by allowing us to look at the sword in his hands, in his perspective, what he's looking at, we're pulling the viewer into the narrative. So that's a really effective. One thing I would caveat I would mention as you proceed, make sure that as he's looking into his gloves, make sure that the broken sword, the hilt, and the gloves are identical to what he has on his face here, because that's going to further emphasize that connection. Okay, so he's got a broken sword in his hands, and then he's like dejected, sitting down. That's a great pose right there. This dejected knight, depressed knight, broken sword, right? Over here, we don't see that kind of thing in his helmet, though, so make sure that you show that I don't know what you call that, plume or what you would call that, the helmet, because that's important to that'll identify this character as the same character we see here. Okay, so then we come down here. Now this is where I get lost. These three frames here, here, and here. Not that I don't follow what's going on. I mean, I don't know what's going on here, right? I don't know what this frame is, but apparently he's grabbing some sort of something to sign. This is where it gets confusing because a sword warrant, I don't, is the viewer going to know what a sword warrant is? I mean, we see he's going to try to sign something. But the bigger issue lies in the fact that don't forget this project does not allow any text at all. So we can't use the word sword warrant on this document right here. That's going to present a little bit of a different situation, perhaps even maybe warrant, not to use the same word, but warrant a different kind of approach here, especially in these three frames right here. But at any rate, so he's saying, okay, so I don't know what he's doing here. I'm just really, really confused on this frame. But then he got a sword warrant and he's signing it with a pen. So you've introduced the solution right here, though we don't know it's the solution yet. And again, I think that's just a really cool way to develop a narrative. So, and again, from his perspective, he's looking, he's got the pen in his hand, he's signing a warrant. Then he goes, wait a second, the answer's right in front of my face, right? So there's the aha moment. There's the solution, implementation of the solution, and an epilogue. So this is excellent. This is excellent. This has issues. Okay, so you have to work those out. Now, another thing is I'm really, really glad that you didn't use squares like a newspaper comic. And I think that keeping this flow organic is a really good idea. I would say one of the neatest things that you could do here, and really something that would add a lot of a lot of compelling visual value, would be to try to figure out how we can connect these frames with something that could possibly be associated with the knight and the sword. Okay, so in other words, you're connecting your frames with arrows, which in this case we absolutely need. Otherwise, we don't know to go across or down or what. But with the arrows, it definitely indicates the flow. That's great. But can we replace the arrows with something maybe a little more interesting? Like, I'm just going to give you an example off the top of my head, but maybe even ink splotches, like little ink splatters here, here. And the ink, of course, is going to be from the pen. So the ink would be the same color as the ink from the pen, right? That's just an idea, but I definitely think that would add some visually compelling value to the visual narrative as a way to connect the frames without just using basic arrows. Okay, so that'll give you another something to think about. All right, great job, really, really. And I enjoyed this a lot. I love that it's almost silly, but it is definitely telling a story. And I say silly because we've got a knight practicing on a sword in modern times, on a dummy practicing in modern times, and he never takes his knight suit off the whole time. I love it. So really nice job. Good creative approach. Okay, so those would be my recommendations. Of course, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'll be glad to make any necessary clarifications. Great job, Brandon. Thank you very much for sharing.